Every detail followed established German procedures for captured aircraft, ensuring safe recognition and operational clarity. The restored Mustang was assigned to a unit unlike any other, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius. Established in 1943 under orders from General Adolf Galland, this traveling evaluation squadron, led by Headman Theodor Rosarius, specialized in giving German pilots first-hand experience with captured Allied aircraft. The unit's mission was both technical and tactical, to demonstrate, in controlled conditions, the capabilities of these machines and to teach Luftwaffe pilots how to exploit any weaknesses while understanding the enemy's strengths. By the time Fraser's Mustang became operational in German hands, the Luftwaffe faced a dire strategic situation. Allied bomber formations penetrated deeper into the Reich with each month, escorted by fighters whose full performance remained partially mysterious. German intelligence relied on fragmentary combat reports, often contradictory, that reflected the confusion of aerial combat rather than systematic analysis. Rosarius recognized that these reports were insufficient. Pilots needed direct exposure. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius was thus conceived as a mobile flying laboratory. Captured aircraft were transported to operational Luftwaffe bases across Germany, allowing frontline pilots to observe, examine, and, in selected cases, engage them in mock combat. The program addressed a critical tactical deficiency. German pilots were trained primarily against their own aircraft, learning tactics optimized for engagements with similar fighters. They were often unprepared for Allied aircraft whose speed, climb, high-altitude performance, and range dramatically exceeded the capabilities of German designs. The operation was highly organized. June 6, 1944. The sky over Normandy was a fractured mosaic of smoke, cloud, and fire. Amid the chaos of D-Day, the sleek metallic form of a P-51 Mustang tore through broken clouds, its Packard Merlin engine coughing a thin trail of black smoke. Lieutenant Thomas Fraser had lost his bearings. His fighter, nicknamed Jerry and coded QPG, crashed into the French countryside. He survived, but the aircraft's journey was far from over. What happened next would reverberate across the Luftwaffe's ranks. German salvage teams swiftly recovered the Mustang, recognizing the unprecedented opportunity it presented. By the following weeks, the aircraft was transported to Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's primary testing ground, where skilled engineers and technicians would painstakingly restore it using parts from other downed P-51s. Painted with German codes and identification markings, the Mustang was about to challenge everything German pilots believed about American engineering and aerial warfare. This was no ordinary repair or intelligence exercise. It was the birth of the Wunderzirkus Rosarius, a traveling unit dedicated to confronting Luftwaffe pilots with tangible evidence of Allied technological and tactical superiority. The Mustang became both teacher and adversary, forcing pilots to re-evaluate their assumptions through hands-on encounters, high-altitude demonstrations, and mock combat. As German pilots climbed into its cockpit, they discovered what propaganda had never admitted: a harmonious airframe, a powerful two-stage, supercharged engine, superior climb and speed, and an aircraft designed not just to fight, but to dominate its intended mission. The lessons were sobering, undeniable, and unforgettable. Witnessing history through steel and sky, the captured Mustang was a mirror of industrial might, tactical brilliance, and innovation. Today, we invite you to step into this story, not as spectators, but as participants. Explore, understand, and reflect on the engineering marvels and strategic decisions that shaped history, and ask yourself, what could you achieve if you embraced such relentless ingenuity and courage? June 6, 1944. Somewhere near Rouen, France, the sky was a violent swirl of gunfire, smoke, and cloud. Allied bombers roared overhead, their formations slicing through the chaos above the Normandy beaches. Lieutenant Thomas Fraser of the 334th Fighter Squadron, 4th Fighter Group, struggled to maintain control of his P-51 Mustang, nicknamed Jerry and coded QPG. The Packard Merlin engine coughed and sputtered as smoke traced the fuselage, a thin ribbon marking the descent toward enemy territory. Navigational confusion and the intensity of aerial combat forced Fraser to execute a controlled crash landing in a French field. He survived, but the Mustang was left behind, a prize the Germans would recognize almost immediately. Within hours, German salvage teams arrived. These units, operating under the meticulous guidance of Belgian battalion salvage battalions, were experts at recovering crashed Allied aircraft before advancing forces could reclaim them. Fraser's Mustang was carefully assessed. Damage had occurred primarily to the landing gear and lower fuselage, but the airframe remained largely intact. To the Germans, it was more than a wreck. It was an intelligence goldmine. By mid-June 1944, the Mustang was transported to Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's primary testing and evaluation facility, approximately 100 kilometers northwest of Berlin and Mecklenburg. Here, the aircraft underwent extensive restoration using components scavenged from other wrecks across occupied Europe. The fuselage was repainted with Luftwaffe markings, bearing the code T9 plus HK, and bright RLM04 yellow on the tail and undersides for identification. Even the propeller spinner received yellow paint, and a red band adorned the nose cowling. Once recovered aircraft arrived at Rechlin, experienced technicians performed systematic repairs, often combining parts from multiple wrecked aircraft to restore a single airframe to flightworthiness. The Packard Merlin 1650-3 engine, license-built from the Rolls-Royce Merlin 63, was meticulously inspected and overhauled, ensuring it produced 1,490 horsepower at 13,750 feet with 61 nhg boost pressure. The Mustang's .50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns were removed and replaced with ballast to maintain correct weight distribution, reflecting strict Luftwaffe regulations against arming captured aircraft used for demonstrations. Control surfaces underwent rigorous inspection, hydraulic systems were pressure tested, and fuel tanks were carefully checked for leaks. The Razorback canopy was preserved, even though German pilots later noted that it restricted rearward visibility compared to the bubble canopy of the P-51D variant. This attention to detail was critical. The aircraft had to perform flawlessly during demonstrations without introducing hazards to the pilots. After weeks of restoration, the Mustang was ready for initial test flights. German test pilots approached it with professional skepticism. Official propaganda had long portrayed American aircraft as crude, mass-produced machines. They expected a mechanically simple, tactically limited fighter. Instead, they found a harmonious design with intuitive cockpit layout, ergonomic controls, and systems that reduced pilot workload. The Packard Merlin responded with smooth, predictable power, and the Mustang accelerated along Rechlin's runway with a short takeoff roll, defying expectations for a fighter of its size. Once airborne, the aircraft revealed its true capabilities. Roll rate, climb performance, and high-altitude handling exceeded German expectations. The Mustang could operate effectively above 30,000 feet, where single-stage German fighters suffered severe power loss. Speed trials demonstrated a maximum of approximately 440 miles per hour at optimal altitude, faster than the Messerschmitt Bf 109G, almost equals 386 mph, and Focke-Wulf FW190A, almost equals 448 mph under comparable conditions. The combination of speed, climb, and range fundamentally challenged German tactical doctrines, allowing pilots to dictate engagements rather than responding reactively. The wings, based on Naka laminar flow airfoil sections, delivered substantial lift with minimal drag, enhancing both maneuverability and fuel efficiency. Dive performance remained stable at high speeds, eliminating the severe control stiffening that German pilots expected. While the Mustang could not match the sustained turn rate of the Bf 109 at medium altitudes, energy tactics, exploiting its superior speed and climb, allowed skilled pilots to avoid disadvantageous turning fights altogether. The technical assessments did not end with flight tests. German engineers systematically disassembled components to study American manufacturing techniques, materials, and assembly methods. They marveled at high-quality aluminum alloys, sophisticated engine design, modular airframe construction, and careful attention to maintainability. Practices increasingly rare in late-war Germany due to material shortages and dispersed production. Fraser's Mustang, T9 plus HK, would eventually visit numerous Luftwaffe bases, exposing hundreds of pilots to first-hand lessons about Allied capabilities. Demonstrations included aerobatic maneuvers, high-speed passes, climb demonstrations to extreme altitudes, and mock combat sessions against German fighters. These exercises shattered previous assumptions, illustrating the Mustang's operational superiority and forcing pilots to confront the harsh realities of strategic disadvantage. By late 1944, the lessons of the Wunderzirkus Rosarius were clear. Knowledge of enemy capabilities could not overcome fundamental resource shortages, fuel limitations, inexperienced pilots, and overwhelming Allied numbers. Even so, the program represented one of the Luftwaffe's most systematic and professional attempts to counter Allied air superiority, providing invaluable tactical and technical intelligence in Germany's darkest hour. July 10, 1944. At the Luftwaffe test facility in Göttingen, just north of Reckland, T9 plus HK, the captured P-51B Mustang flown by Lieutenant Thomas Fraser days earlier, was prepared for an extensive evaluation program. German engineers, led by Oberingenieur Karl-Heinz Flettner, were tasked with systematically measuring every performance parameter of the aircraft, from climb rate and speed to high-altitude handling and structural integrity under extreme stress. By now, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius had begun coordinating demonstration flights for Luftwaffe squadron leaders, ensuring that first-hand exposure to Allied aircraft reached beyond test pilots to operational units struggling to defend German skies. Göttingen had become a hive of technical activity. Flight logs, speed charts, and barometric readings littered workspaces, while engineers meticulously recorded fuel consumption at different throttle settings. They were particularly interested in the Packard 1650-3 Merlin engine, license-built in the United States under Rolls-Royce designs. The two-stage supercharger with intercooler system produced exceptional high-altitude power, allowing sustained operations above 30,000 feet, where conventional German fighters like the Bf-109G or FW-190 suffered dramatic reductions in engine output. Test flights confirmed what theoretical analyses had suggested. At 20,000 feet, T9 plus HK climbed at approximately 3,200 feet per minute, outpacing the Bf-109G6 by more than 400 feet per minute under equivalent conditions. Maximum speed exceeded 440 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, giving German pilots little hope of escaping a determined Mustang using standard performance envelopes. Even dives, often used by German pilots to regain energy, revealed the Mustang's superior aerodynamic stability. Control surfaces remained responsive at speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, a testament to Nacke-laminar flow wing design and careful structural engineering. By July 15th, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius had begun demonstrating the Mustang to operational Luftwaffe units stationed in the eastern and western sectors. Flight leaders conducted detailed lectures immediately following demonstration sorties, highlighting both the strengths and vulnerabilities of the Mustang. Pilots were taught to exploit situations where German aircraft retained advantages, low-speed turns at lower altitudes, and energy conservation maneuvers that leveraged the Bf-109's superior instantaneous turn rate. However, these exercises often produced a sobering effect rather than inspiration. Observing the Mustang's unmatched range, high-altitude performance, and sheer speed made clear to German pilots that tactical skill alone would not offset material and engineering deficiencies. The psychological impact of the program became increasingly apparent. Experienced pilots, already aware of the growing attrition of their ranks, recognized that Allied aircraft superiority was not merely anecdotal, it was quantifiable. Whereas new German recruits might have relied on textbooks, simulations, or fragmented intelligence reports, these demonstrations provided concrete evidence of the performance gaps they faced in combat. German morale, already under stress due to fuel shortages, limited training, and relentless Allied operations, was further challenged. Pilots understood that even under optimal conditions, engagements with Mustangs would be perilous and survival uncertain. The technical intelligence gained extended beyond flight performance. At Göttingen, engineers conducted detailed dissections of airframe components, including wing spars, control linkages, and hydraulic systems. The use of high-grade aluminum alloys, precise tolerances in assembly, and modular construction impressed German engineers accustomed to dispersed production facilities constrained by Allied bombing. Fuel systems were meticulously studied, revealing how the Mustang's design achieved extraordinary range through internal tanks supplemented by drop tanks while maintaining structural integrity and minimal performance penalties. Meanwhile, the Wunderzirkus Reservius began to adapt its training materials based on direct pilot feedback. Mock combat sessions allowed German instructors to simulate realistic scenarios, emphasizing avoidance of the Mustang's strengths while capitalizing on temporary tactical advantages. For example, German pilots were taught to force engagements in a low-altitude, tight-turning environments where the Bf-109 or FW-190 could maneuver more effectively. Climbing and diving engagements were choreographed to illustrate the energy exchanges necessary to survive encounters with faster, higher-flying opponents. By the end of July, the logistical challenges of the program became evident. Fuel shortages increasingly restricted the number of demonstration sorties, and operational units complained that traveling to central demonstration locations consumed scarce resources. Nevertheless, the Wunderzirkus Reservius remained operational, moving captured aircraft between bases as long as fuel, maintenance capabilities, and operational airfields permitted. Each demonstration served dual purposes: technical education and morale calibration, exposing German pilots to realities they could no longer ignore. Additionally, captured Mustangs were occasionally loaned to Allied Axis pilots. A single P-51B was dispatched to Neuruppin Airfield, approximately 60 kilometers northwest of Berlin, to train Hungarian fighter pilots operating Focke-Wulf FW-190s. The Hungarians were taught similar tactical principles: exploit advantages in low-altitude turning, avoid high-altitude engagements, and recognize that operational survival depended on discipline and situational awareness. These efforts reflected Germany's acknowledgement that the Mustang was a strategic threat that required dissemination of specialized countertactics throughout Allied forces. Technical reports generated during July highlighted key performance disparities. Engineers noted maximum service ceilings for the Mustang around 41,900 feet, a substantial advantage over the Bf-109G6, almost equals 39,000 feet, and FW-190A8, almost equals 37,400 feet. Climb performance, especially in the first 20,000 feet of altitude gain, remained consistently superior, giving American pilots the ability to dictate the terms of engagement. Maximum operational range, approximately 1,650 miles with drop tanks, rendered previous German interception doctrines largely obsolete. These reports were distributed across German fighter units, informing strategic planning and the development of future aircraft like the FW-190D series and Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighter. By mid-July, engineers had completed partial disassembly of T9 plus HK. The Merlin engine underwent detailed examination, with careful documentation of supercharger performance, fuel injection efficiency, and intercooler operation. German engineers were impressed by the precision and reliability of the components, noting that late-war German engines were increasingly inconsistent due to material shortages and dispersed manufacturing. Observations of the Mustang's control harmonization and aerodynamic design provided inspiration for incremental improvements in German fighter concepts, although strategic constraints prevented full adoption. Despite the extensive insights gained, German pilots and engineers recognized that knowledge alone could not bridge the growing operational gap. Allied numerical superiority, combined with the Mustang's performance advantages and better trained pilots, meant that German air defense would continue to degrade under sustained strategic bombing campaigns. While tactics refined through the Wunderzirkus Rosarius program improved theoretical survival rates, reality often dictated otherwise. Novice pilots, arriving at front lines with minimal flight hours due to fuel rationing, faced near-certain attrition against experienced American Mustang pilots executing coordinated escort missions. The demonstration program also revealed industrial lessons. German engineers studied assembly line methods, noting how American designers balanced high production rates with consistent quality. Modular construction, standardized components, and robust quality control allowed for mass production without sacrificing performance. By contrast, German facilities, increasingly reliant on dispersed operations and forced labor, struggled to maintain consistent quality, leading to mechanical failures and operational downtime. These realizations underscored the strategic disadvantage inherent in Germany's industrial situation. Even brilliant engineering could not overcome limitations imposed by bombing, resource scarcity, and logistical fragmentation. By the end of July 1944, T9 plus HK had provided hundreds of Luftwaffe pilots with direct exposure to the Mustang's capabilities. Test pilots and squadron leaders had internalized its strengths and weaknesses, passing tactical knowledge to frontline units. Yet, the overarching narrative remained unchanged. The Mustang represented a performance ceiling German fighters could not reach, a technological milestone American industry could mass produce, and a tactical problem that would remain insurmountable given Germany's material, industrial, and pilot training constraints. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius program, despite its sophistication, highlighted a sobering truth. Information could improve understanding, enhance tactical decision-making, and extend pilot survivability marginally, but it could not reverse the fundamental strategic imbalance. German pilots left demonstration flights with professional respect for the Mustang, an acute awareness of their disadvantages, and a knowledge that courage, skill, and tactical innovation alone would not suffice against the Allies' industrial and technological superiority. August 1, 1944. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius continued to expand its operations across multiple Luftwaffe bases, leveraging captured aircraft to provide frontline pilots with practical exposure to enemy capabilities. T9 plus HK, the P-51B Mustang that had first landed in Germany after D-Day, remained the centerpiece of this program, now supplemented by a second Mustang, T9 plus CK, acquired under similarly dramatic circumstances. German engineers and flight leaders worked to systematically maximize the intelligence value extracted from these aircraft, pairing rigorous technical testing with tactical instruction designed for operational pilots facing increasingly overwhelming Allied air power. The technical evaluation program intensified at Göttingen. German engineers meticulously measured aerodynamic properties under varying configurations, including clean wing, bombed loadout, and drop tank conditions. Wing lift characteristics, drag coefficients, and control responsiveness were documented across the full flight envelope. At altitudes above 25,000 feet, the Mustang demonstrated unmatched stability during sustained climbs and high-speed dives, while its laminar flow wing design minimized drag and improved overall efficiency, a feature unmatched by German fighters of the era. Oberingenieur Flettner personally oversaw a series of mock dogfights to observe maneuvering behavior, noting that the aircraft retained control authority at velocities where the Bf-109G or FW-190A would risk structural failure. During early August, demonstration flights shifted focus to eastern and western operational sectors, where Luftwaffe units faced constant pressure from Allied bombers escorted by Mustang formations. Flight leaders emphasized a twofold lesson. First, the areas in which German fighters could temporarily gain advantage, such as low-altitude turning engagements, and second, the strategic reality of confronting superior numbers of aircraft with broader operational range. Pilots observed the Mustang's ability to execute sustained high-altitude maneuvers while carrying full fuel loads and, in some configurations, bombs, capabilities previously underestimated in Allied reports. The psychological effects on German pilots were profound. Veteran Bf-109 and FW-190 pilots, who had survived the grueling summer of 1944 air combat over France and Germany, now confronted indisputable evidence of the Mustang's superiority. Even when tactics were theoretically sound, the aircraft's speed, climb rate, and operational ceiling imposed limits that could not be overcome by piloting skill alone. Newly trained pilots, arriving with minimal flight hours due to persistent fuel shortages, faced a daunting reality. Their aircraft would likely be outclassed in nearly every measurable performance category against seasoned American Mustang pilots. In parallel, German engineers continued in-depth studies of structural and mechanical systems. The Mustang's wing spars, a combination of lightweight yet durable aluminum alloys, provided critical insight into mass production methods that balance structural integrity with weight reduction. Hydraulic systems were examined for both reliability and simplicity of maintenance. German engineers noted the difference in component tolerances and overall craftsmanship between American production lines and the increasingly dispersed, under-resourced German manufacturing system. Fuel systems, including internal tanks supplemented by external drop tanks, were analyzed to understand the remarkable operational range achieved without sacrificing maneuverability, a capability that allowed American bombers to penetrate deep into German territory with escort support throughout the mission. By mid-August, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius initiated joint tactical exercises with operational units, simulating combat encounters between German fighters and Mustang aggressors. Flight leaders highlighted precise, tactical maneuvers. Engage in sustained turning fights at lower altitudes to exploit the FW-190's instantaneous turn rate, avoid high-altitude climbs where the Mustang excelled, and recognize energy management as the decisive factor in surviving engagements. Even under these control conditions, however, pilots quickly recognized the limits of tactical adjustments. The Mustang's superior speed and altitude capabilities often allowed American pilots to disengage at will, choosing the terms of combat. The program also extended lessons to German allies. A P-51B was temporarily assigned to a Hungarian fighter training school at Neuruppin, northwest of Berlin, to teach Hungarian pilots how to exploit the limited advantages of their FW-190s against long-range American Mustangs. The instruction included both theoretical classroom briefings and practical flight sessions, emphasizing energy conservation, situational awareness, and avoidance of combat zones dominated by superior enemy aircraft. German observers documented the Hungarian pilot struggles with the Mustang's acceleration and sustained high-altitude performance, noting that even disciplined, experienced pilots could only rarely maneuver successfully against superior enemy aircraft without significant tactical support. The intelligence gathered from Mustang operations also informed ongoing German fighter development programs. Detailed reports from T9 plus HK and T9 plus CK indicated that existing fighters, including Bf-109 variants and early FW-190 models, could not reliably contest American aircraft in any critical category without substantial modifications. This drove accelerated research into high-altitude variants, including the FW-190D series and experimental projects such as the Ta-152. Engineers and planners also used Mustang data to refine future jet and rocket power designs, most notably the Me-262, which promised speed and firepower advantages but faced its own logistical, fuel, and reliability challenges. By late August 1944, cumulative flight data and tactical observations had produced an exhaustive technical dossier on the Mustang. German engineers compiled speed-altitude graphs, climb curves, turn radius metrics, and operational range tables. Comparative analyses showed that while the Bf-109G could outperform the Mustang in very specific low-altitude scenarios, the Mustang's high-altitude performance, range, and structural reliability rendered these advantages largely irrelevant in operational missions. Furthermore, logistical superiority, available fuel, maintenance personnel, and parts favored American operations, highlighting that technical evaluation alone could not resolve strategic deficiencies. The psychological reality was increasingly undeniable. The Luftwaffe could adapt tactics and train pilots, but even optimally executed maneuvers could not consistently overcome the Mustang's inherent performance advantages combined with Allied numerical superiority. Flight leaders reported candidly in internal briefings that the Mustang represented a comprehensive operational challenge, an aircraft designed to escort bombers across the entire depth of German territory, withstand diverse combat conditions, and permit disengagement when tactically advantageous. No combination of German tactics, pilot skill, or incremental aircraft upgrades could fully neutralize these advantages. Technical lessons continued to accumulate. German engineers noted the simplicity of assembly operations, standardized components, and modular design that allowed American factories to produce hundreds of Mustangs monthly with remarkably consistent quality. By contrast, German production increasingly relied on dispersed manufacturing, sometimes utilizing forced labor, resulting in inconsistent component quality and reduced operational reliability. These production insights reinforced the strategic challenge. Even advanced German aircraft could not be produced in sufficient quantity or with consistent quality to counter the Mustang threat effectively. As August closed, T9 plus HK had conducted over 50 formal demonstration flights, each followed by detailed debriefings and classroom-style tactical briefings. Hundreds of Luftwaffe pilots had now observed firsthand the Mustang's capabilities, internalized its operational envelope, and received structured guidance on exploiting the few marginal areas where German aircraft retained superiority. Yet, the overarching conclusion was clear. Tactical knowledge could only extend survival and effectiveness marginally in a war increasingly defined by Allied material and technological dominance. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius continued operating despite fuel rationing, Allied bombing, and logistical pressures. Captured aircraft like T9 plus HK and T9 plus EK offered German pilots both a practical education in Allied capabilities and a sobering recognition of their strategic limitations. These experiences reinforced the professional acknowledgement among Luftwaffe pilots that courage and skill, while indispensable, could not fully compensate for systemic disparities in aircraft performance, industrial output, and operational logistics. By the end of August 1944, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius had cemented its role as a critical tactical intelligence and training initiative. German pilots and engineers now possessed detailed knowledge of the P-51 Mustang's performance, strengths, and limitations. However, the broader strategic picture remained grim. Superior Allied numbers, high-quality production, well-trained pilots, and logistical advantages meant that even this sophisticated program could not alter the trajectory of the air war over Germany. Knowledge, though powerful, had limits when confronted by overwhelming material and operational disparities. September 1st, 1944. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius pressed onward with an intensified schedule of captured aircraft operations despite increasingly constrained resources. T9 plus HK and T9 plus CK, the P-51B Mustangs that had become central to Luftwaffe evaluation programs, remained at the forefront of systematic testing and tactical instruction. German engineers, test pilots, and flight leaders recognized the urgent strategic imperative, with Allied bombing campaigns relentlessly penetrating deep into Germany and fuel shortages worsening daily. Each flight offered a rare opportunity to prepare pilots for the brutal realities of combat against aircraft with capabilities far surpassing Germany's current frontline fighters. The unit's activities in early September focused on refining operational knowledge of Mustang performance under combat-like conditions. Flight engineers conducted repeated climb and dive tests, documenting detailed altitude speed curves, engine response, and handling characteristics under various load conditions. The Packard-built Merlin engine's performance was studied meticulously. Its two-stage, supercharger, and intercooler system enabled sustained high-altitude operations without the overheating and mechanical failures increasingly common in German inline engines like the DB605. Engineers also measured throttle response, fuel consumption at maximum continuous power, and the efficiency of the Mustang's cooling systems. Data intended to inform potential German design adaptations, though the practical application was severely limited by material shortages and production constraints. Demonstration flights were organized at multiple Luftwaffe bases, from the heart of central Germany to the rapidly shifting front lines in the west. Flight leaders emphasized energy management and situational awareness, training pilots to recognize the P-51's decisive advantages: speed, climb rate, high-altitude performance, and operational range. Tactical briefings incorporated real-world lessons from ongoing combat missions. Pilots were instructed to avoid high-altitude engagements where Mustangs excelled, instead exploiting short bursts of low-altitude maneuvering, steep dives, and coordinated attacks in groups. Yet, even when executed flawlessly, these tactics offered only marginal improvements in survivability. The Mustang's superior speed and ability to disengage will often negated any German advantage. During mid-September, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius expanded its outreach to German Allied units. At the Neuruppin airfield near Berlin, Hungarian pilots received hands-on training with a captured Mustang, learning both its performance envelope and vulnerabilities. Instructors emphasized exploiting WWII's turning performance at lower altitudes, while cautioning against engagement scenarios that played directly to the Mustang's strengths. The transfer of this knowledge reflected a sobering acknowledgement within Luftwaffe command. Allied Mustangs represented not just a technical challenge, but a strategic threat requiring coordination across all German-aligned forces. German engineers also continued intensive technical dissections. Wing spars, laminates, and rivet patterns were examined to understand the lightweight, high-strength construction enabling both aerodynamic efficiency and durability. Fuel system design, particularly the internal tank layout and drop tank integration, offered insights into the Mustang's extraordinary operational range, a range that allowed continuous escort coverage for deep penetration bombing missions that previously had been impossible. Detailed comparisons between German materials and American alloys highlighted the impact of resource scarcity on Luftwaffe fighter performance. Where American engineers enjoyed access to high-grade aluminum, specialized steels, and quality rubber compounds, German production increasingly relied on substitutes, resulting in reduced structural integrity, inconsistent performance, and heightened maintenance requirements. The tactical implications of Mustang operations became increasingly clear. Pilots who had flown or observed the aircraft reported a harsh reality. Engagement with the P-51 at operational altitudes meant fighting at a severe disadvantage. Attempting to intercept escorted bombers required German pilots to penetrate layers of superior enemy fighters, often with minimal fuel reserves and under constant threat from both defensive formations and Allied ground-based radar guidance. Flight leaders stressed the necessity of disciplined energy management, careful coordination in multi-aircraft formations, and avoidance of head-on engagements where the Mustang's superior acceleration could dominate. Yet, even with these tactical refinements, attrition rates remained unsustainable. New pilots, arriving with minimal training due to fuel shortages, survived only a handful of missions on average, while veteran pilots, those with the skill and judgment to exploit marginal advantages, were lost at alarming rates. By late September 1944, internal Luftwaffe assessments highlighted both the value and limitations of the Wunderzirkus Rosarius program. The captured Mustangs provided detailed, actionable intelligence, enabling pilots to recognize performance gaps and optimize engagement tactics. Detailed reports compared climb rates, turn radii, top speed, and high-altitude handling characteristics against Bf-109 and Fw-190 variants. Yet, these insights could not compensate for broader strategic imbalances. Allied numerical superiority, high-quality pilot training, logistical robustness, and production efficiency created a systemic advantage that German forces could not counter with tactics alone. The psychological dimension of the Mustang program became increasingly evident. Pilots who observed or flew T9 plus HK and T9 plus CK expressed a mix of professional respect and grim resignation. The aircraft's capabilities confirmed that previous assumptions about Allied technological inferiority were false. Veteran Luftwaffe pilots recognized that even with advanced tactics and superior skill, German fighters faced inherent performance limitations that dictated the terms of engagement. Morale, already strained by sustained losses and relentless bombing campaigns, experienced additional pressure as pilots confronted the tangible reality of Allied air superiority. In parallel, German engineers sought practical lessons for domestic production. Observations from the Mustang informed incremental improvements to high-altitude variants, including the FW190D series and experimental projects like the Ta-152. Yet these efforts were chronically hampered by material shortages, bombed manufacturing facilities, and the logistical chaos of a collapsing war economy. Even when design insights were actionable in theory, the combination of Allied bombing campaigns and resource constraints prevented timely implementation or mass production of superior German aircraft. September's operations also revealed the Mustang's impact on broader strategic calculations. Long-range escort missions by American Mustangs rendered previously exploitable gaps in bomber coverage obsolete. Intercepting Allied bombers now required German pilots to engage in prolonged, high-risk encounters against both bombers and their highly capable escorts. The risk of pilot loss escalated dramatically, forcing flight leaders to adapt tactics continuously while acknowledging the growing limitations imposed by inferior aircraft, fuel shortages, and declining pilot experience. By the end of September 1944, Wunderzirkus Rosarius had achieved a dual outcome. Technically, German forces possessed precise knowledge of Mustang performance, systems, and optimal engagement strategies. Psychologically, pilots confronted the immutable reality of their disadvantages. Operational range, speed, high-altitude performance, and numbers favored the Allies decisively. The program, while invaluable for tactical instruction and morale management, could not alter the broader trajectory of the air war. German pilots were increasingly aware that survival and effectiveness depended on exploiting narrow, often fleeting advantages against an opponent with overwhelming material and technical superiority. As September drew to a close, the captured Mustangs had become living classrooms, instruments of both technical analysis and operational realism. Pilots who flew T9 plus HK and T9 plus CK gained unparalleled understanding of American fighter capabilities, while engineers incorporated lessons into design considerations for advanced German aircraft. However, the cumulative data, no matter how detailed or accurate, confronted the Luftwaffe with an unavoidable truth. Superior knowledge could extend survivability marginally, but could not counteract the structural, logistical, and technological dominance of Allied air power. October 1st, 1944. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius pressed forward into the autumn months, determined to maximize the operational and tactical value of the captured P-51 Mustangs. T9 plus HK and T9 plus CK remained the core of systematic evaluations, but the program now faced increasingly severe constraints. Fuel shortages deepened, Allied bombing intensified, and the Luftwaffe's infrastructure teetered on the edge of collapse. Despite these mounting challenges, the unit's mission remained clear: extract every possible insight from American aircraft, train pilots to exploit any limited advantage, and document technical findings that might inform late-war German fighter development. The early days of October were dominated by repeated performance testing of Mustang flight characteristics under fully operational conditions. Engineers and pilots meticulously recorded climb rates, dive acceleration, and speed at multiple altitudes, cross-referencing these data points against Bf-109G and FW-190A series fighters. The Mustang's Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, built under license by Packard, continued to astound German engineers with its sophisticated two-stage supercharger, reliable operation at high altitudes, and remarkable endurance under full throttle operation. Detailed measurements of fuel consumption at various power settings were conducted to understand how Americans achieved the Mustang's extraordinary range, enabling missions that German pilots increasingly recognized as strategically decisive. Demonstration flights during the first 2 weeks of October expanded to include operational tactics for confronting multiple Mustang formations. Flight leaders emphasized coordinated attacks in layered formations, energy management, and the importance of avoiding head-on engagements where the Mustang's superior acceleration allowed it to dictate combat conditions. Pilots were trained to exploit sustained turn performance at lower altitudes and to identify points where German fighters could momentarily gain an advantage in tactical skirmishes. Yet, despite these refinements, attrition remained severe. German replacement pilots, arriving with minimal training due to fuel constraints and the loss of experienced instructors, were often ill-prepared for encounters with highly skilled American pilots in superior aircraft. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius also continued its efforts in technical intelligence. Wing spars, fuselage laminates, rivet patterns, and control surface design were examined in extraordinary detail. German engineers noted the consistent high-quality materials throughout the Mustang, contrasting sharply with the increasingly compromised alloys and substitutes used in late-war German production. They observed that American assembly line methods allowed high-volume production without sacrificing quality, a stark contrast to the dispersed and labor-intensive German manufacturing process, which relied increasingly on undertrained or forced labor. Tactical briefings in October incorporated real-time combat reports, illustrating how Mustangs were transforming Allied air operations. The combination of speed, altitude performance, and endurance enabled continuous bomber escort deep into German territory, rendering previous Luftwaffe strategies, which relied on gaps in escort coverage, effectively obsolete. Pilots were instructed on methods to counteract numerical and technical disadvantages, emphasizing ambush tactics, altitude exploitation at low levels, and group coordination. However, these tactics could only provide limited relief against the overwhelming superiority of Allied formations, particularly given Germany's diminishing pilot experience and operational readiness. By mid-October, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius expanded its training efforts to German Allied units, including Hungarian and Romanian fighter contingents. Capture Mustangs were employed as teaching platforms, illustrating both strengths and vulnerabilities. Hungarian pilots trained to coordinate with their FW-190s to exploit brief advantages in turning performance, altitude, and speed, while simultaneously learning to avoid scenarios where the Mustang's range and high-altitude capability dominated. These efforts reflected a growing recognition that German-aligned forces needed unified tactics to survive against numerically and technologically superior American formations. Engineering evaluations continued alongside operational training. The Mustang's wing design, specifically its laminar flow profile, offered remarkable lift-to-drag efficiency, reducing fuel consumption and enabling high-speed, high-altitude operation without compromising handling. German engineers analyzed control surface responsiveness, hydraulic systems, landing gear reliability, and fuel tank integration. The Packard-built Merlin engine, in particular, received extraordinary attention. Its modular construction allowed maintenance efficiency, and the supercharger system enabled sustained high-altitude performance unmatched by German inline engines, whose quality was increasingly compromised by material shortages and dispersed manufacturing. Despite these insights, Luftwaffe pilots increasingly recognized the psychological impact of confronting such an advanced adversary. Observing or flying T9 plus HK and T9 plus CK revealed undeniable technical superiority and forced the acknowledgement that German aircraft were increasingly inadequate. Pilot accounts from October 1944 describe growing tension, resignation, and professional respect for American engineering, even as operational circumstances became progressively dire. These encounters shattered prior assumptions of German technical superiority and underscored the unsustainability of defending against Allied bomber raids without overwhelming numerical or tactical advantage. The strategic implications of Mustang operations during October were profound. Long-range bomber escort missions, previously limited by fuel constraints and aircraft endurance, became operationally sustainable for the Allies, effectively neutralizing Germany's defensive depth. Luftwaffe pilots faced relentless pressure to intercept escorted formations, knowing that every engagement carried an elevated risk of loss. Experienced pilots, who might have used tactical ingenuity to maximize limited advantages, were increasingly rare. New pilots faced a steep learning curve under conditions that favored the enemy, both technologically and numerically. Operational reports generated by Wunderzirkus Rosarius underscored these realities. Detailed comparisons of climb rates, maximum speeds, and maneuverability were circulated throughout Luftwaffe Command, informing both tactical planning and experimental design programs. Observations from Mustang operations influenced late-war German development efforts, including the FW-190D, TAL-152, and jet-powered Me-262. Yet, material shortages, Allied bombing campaigns, and the collapsing industrial infrastructure prevented these programs from achieving meaningful operational impact. Even the Me-262, while technologically impressive, faced severe limitations in fuel availability, engine reliability, and pilot training, rendering it strategically insufficient against the overwhelming Allied air presence. As October ended, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius faced increasing logistical challenges. Allied advances in the west and east made relocation of aircraft and personnel risky, and fuel shortages increasingly limited the frequency of operational flights. Nevertheless, the unit maintained its commitment to systematic evaluation and training, recognizing the tactical, technical, and psychological value of captured Mustangs. Every sortie provided critical insights into engagement tactics, aircraft capabilities, and operational limitations, equipping pilots with knowledge that, while unable to alter strategic outcomes, offered marginal improvements in combat survivability. The cumulative impact of October operations demonstrated the dual nature of the program's achievements. On one hand, Luftwaffe pilots gained unparalleled technical and operational understanding of the P-51 Mustang, including optimal engagement strategies, performance envelopes, and system capabilities. On the other, the program made painfully clear the structural and strategic disadvantages facing Germany. Knowledge could extend survival and inform tactical decision-making, but it could not compensate for inferior production capacity, declining pilot quality, logistical fragility, and overwhelming enemy numbers. By the close of October 1944, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius had solidified its reputation as a sophisticated, professional evaluation unit. Pilots and engineers alike appreciated the technical insights afforded by Mustang operations, yet the broader strategic reality remained stark. Germany's air defense capabilities were increasingly insufficient, and the knowledge gained from captured aircraft, however valuable, could not reverse the trajectory of a collapsing Luftwaffe. November 1st, 1944. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius entered the final 2 months of systematic Mustang evaluation. Operational pressures intensified as Allied bombing and advancing fronts strained Luftwaffe resources. T9 plus HK and T9 plus CK remained at the forefront of tactical demonstrations, but dwindling fuel, maintenance difficulties, and personnel shortages imposed severe limitations. Despite these constraints, every sortie, every test, and every demonstration carried strategic and psychological significance. Captured Mustangs now represented not only technical intelligence, but a mirror reflecting Germany's growing inability to challenge Allied air dominance. Early November flights emphasized realistic combat scenarios. Pilots simulated engagements against Mustang formations to refine energy tactics, defensive positioning, and group coordination. Emphasis was placed on exploiting marginal advantages, such as low-altitude turn performance or temporary gaps in formation cohesion. However, German instructors were acutely aware that these lessons offered only limited survival benefit. Replacement pilots arrived with minimal experience, often incapable of executing advanced maneuvers under combat stress. Even skilled veterans faced relentless attrition, with October losses having already depleted experienced ranks. The psychological toll on pilots was immense, as first-hand experience with captured Mustangs reinforced the grim truth. They confronted aircraft that consistently outperformed their own in every critical operational parameter: speed, climb rate, high-altitude handling, and range. Meanwhile, German engineers continued exhaustive technical evaluations. Detailed dissections of the Mustang airframe, including laminar flow wing structures, hydraulic systems, and fuselage assembly techniques, revealed American advances in design efficiency and material quality. The Packard-built Merlin engine continued to impress with its reliability, two-stage supercharger performance, and maintainability, highlighting a stark contrast with deteriorating German engine production. Fuel and hydraulic systems were studied intensively, revealing advanced American integration techniques that maximized operational endurance without compromising reliability. Even small details such as rivet uniformity and control linkage tolerances demonstrated production standards that German factories, constrained by bombing, material shortages, and dispersed forced labor, could no longer consistently achieve. By mid-November, the Wunderzirkus Rosarius expanded its training to Allied air forces. Hungarian and Romanian pilots received hands-on Mustang demonstrations, learning to coordinate their FW-190s and BF-109s in carefully choreographed engagement patterns designed to exploit limited advantages. Briefings emphasized situational awareness, avoidance of head-on confrontations, and disciplined energy management. While these tactics offered marginal survivability improvements, the overwhelming reality of Allied numbers and superior aircraft capabilities persisted. Every operational sortie reaffirmed the futility of Germany's defensive air strategy without a transformative technological or industrial breakthrough. The cumulative tactical intelligence collected through November flights informed late-war German fighter development programs. Insights influenced the FW-190DS high-altitude optimization, the Tu-152's long-range performance considerations, and even conceptual designs for jet and rocket-powered interceptors. Yet, strategic constraints, severe material shortages, fuel scarcity, Allied bombing disruption, and insufficient trained personnel prevented these designs from achieving operational significance. Even the Me-262 jet fighter, Germany's most advanced effort, faced chronic engine failures, limited production numbers, and tactical vulnerability due to runway requirements and pilot inexperience. The P-51, in contrast, continued to dominate Allied missions in both quantity and quality, providing deep escort coverage that left the Luftwaffe increasingly powerless to influence bomber rates. December 1st, 1944. As the year drew to a close, Wunderzirkus Rosarius conducted its final series of Mustang demonstrations. T-9 plus HK and its sister aircraft had now traversed almost the entire Reich, imparting first-hand technical and tactical knowledge to hundreds of Luftwaffe and Allied pilots. Yet operational limitations had grown severe. Allied advances in the west and east restricted safe relocation of personnel and aircraft. Fuel allocations became critically scarce, limiting flights to only the highest priority training sorties. Nonetheless, every remaining Mustang sortie provided invaluable data on energy tactics, speed management, formation engagement, and technical understanding, ensuring that German pilots faced the strategic reality fully informed, if not fully prepared. The final lessons of December underscored both the technical mastery of the Mustang and the broader strategic imbalance. Pilots and engineers alike recognized that the aircraft's design, optimized for long-range escort, high-speed engagement, and high-altitude performance, embodied a holistic engineering approach unmatched by German production under late-war constraints. Direct engagement with captured Mustangs left no doubt that American industrial capability, technical training, and design philosophy had decisively outpaced Germany's. Even with the most sophisticated tactical maneuvers, German pilots faced unavoidable disadvantages in equipment, numbers, and overall operational sustainability. As T-9 plus HK flew its last recorded sorties, the psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots crystallized. The Mustang was no longer just an aircraft. It was a tangible embodiment of American engineering superiority, industrial capacity, and tactical foresight. Knowledge gained from direct experience, observation, and systematic testing provided tactical guidance, but also reinforced the reality of inevitable defeat. The Wunderzirkus Rosarius mission, while highly professional and technically rigorous, could not alter the trajectory of a collapsing Luftwaffe facing overwhelming Allied resources. The story of the Wunderzirkus Rosarius and captured P-51 Mustangs is a vivid lesson in the transformative power of first-hand knowledge, rigorous analysis, and professional skill, even under desperate circumstances. It demonstrates that while intelligence, innovation, and tactical mastery are essential, they must be paired with sufficient resources, planning, and strategic positioning to achieve true impact. Let this history inspire you. Pursue knowledge relentlessly, seek to understand challenges directly, and never underestimate the value of hands-on experience. Equip yourself with skills and insights that not only inform, but also empower you to make decisive, impactful decisions. Excellence is born from rigorous engagement with reality, not assumptions. Step into the arena, embrace challenges head-on, and build capabilities that place you in a league of your own, an outclass force that turns knowledge into unmatched advantage.